The vastness of the Lord's heaven follows from many of the things that have been presented above, especially from the fact that heaven is from the human race, not only that portion of it born within the church, but also the portion born outside it. This means that heaven includes everyone who has lived a good life since the very beginning of our planet. Anyone familiar with the continents and regions and nations of this world may gather what a multitude of people there are on our whole globe. Anyone who goes into the mathematics of it will discover that thousands and thousands of people die on any given day, making hundreds of thousands or millions every year. And this has been going on since the earliest times, thousands of years ago. All of these people have arrived in the other world, called the spiritual world, after their decease, and they are still arriving. I cannot say how many of these are or are becoming angels of heaven. I have been told that most of the earliest people became angels because they thought more deeply and spiritually, and were therefore enveloped in heavenly affection, while for later ages it was not so many because, as time passed, we became more externally minded and began to think more on the natural level, which meant that we were enveloped in more earthly affection. I cannot say how many of these are or are becoming angels of heaven. I have been told that most of the earliest people became angels because they thought more deeply and spiritually, and were therefore enveloped in heavenly affection, while for later ages it was not so many because, as time passed, we became more externally minded and began to think more on the natural level, which meant that we were enveloped in more earthly affection. This enables us to gather at the outset that heaven is huge simply from the inhabitants of this planet. The immensity of the Lord's heaven may also be gathered simply from the fact that all children, whether born within or outside the church, are adopted by the Lord and become angels, and their number amounts to a quarter or a fifth of the whole human race. It may be seen above that every child, wherever born, whether within the church or outside it, whether of devout or irreverent parents, is accepted by the Lord at death. Every child is raised in heaven, is taught, and is permeated with affections for what is good according to the divine design, and thereby with first-hand knowledge of things true, and is then perfected in intelligence and wisdom, so to speak, and admitted into heaven to become an angel. You can gather what a vast multitude of heaven's angels has come from this source alone, from the beginning of creation to the present day. The vastness of the Lord's heaven also follows from the fact that all the planets we can see in our solar system are Earths, and especially that there are untold more in the universe, all inhabited as discussed in a special booklet titled Other Planets, from which I should like to cite the following. It is common knowledge in the other life that there are many planets with people on them and therefore angels and spirits from them, since anyone who wants to talk with spirits from other planets because of a love of the truth and a desire to be useful is allowed to do so, to be convinced of the plurality of worlds, to learn that the human race is not just from one Earth, but from countless planets. I have talked about this on occasion with spirits from our Earth, noting that intellectually gifted people could know, on the basis of much that is familiar to them, that there are many Earths with people on them. That is, they could come to the rational conclusion that masses as big as the planets, some of which are larger than our Earth, are not empty lumps created only to meander around the sun and radiate their feeble light for just one planet, but that their function must be more worthwhile than this. People who believe, as they should, that the divine created the universe for the sole purpose of the emergence of the human race and a heaven from it, for the human race is the seedbed of heaven, cannot help but believe that there are people wherever there is a planet. It is abundantly clear that the planets visible to our eyes, the ones in our solar system, are Earths, because they are material bodies, since they reflect the sun's light, and when we look at them through a telescope, they do not look like ruddy fiery stars, but like Earths, with blurry bands of color. There is also the fact that they are born around the sun, through the stations of the zodiac, just like our Earth, which must cause years and the seasons of the year called spring, summer, fall, and winter. Similarly, they rotate on their axes like our Earth, which makes days and the times of day called morning, noon, evening, and night. Not only that, some of them have moons called satellites, which have their own periodic orbits around their sphere, the way the moon orbits our Earth. The planet Saturn, which is very far from the sun, has also a huge luminous belt that gives a great deal of light to that planet, even though it is reflected light. How could anyone who knows all this and thinks rationally say that these are empty bodies? Then too, I have talked with spirits about the fact that people could realize that there is more than one Earth in the universe from the fact that the starry heaven is so immense. There are so incomprehensibly many stars in it, each one a sun in its own place and its own system, like our sun, of different magnitudes. If people think this through carefully, they will come to the conclusion that this whole vast universe cannot be anything but a means to an end, which is the goal of creation. A heavenly kingdom in which the divine can dwell with angels and with us. The visible universe, the heaven spangled with so incomprehensibly many stars that are all suns, is in fact simply a means for the production of planets with people on them who can make up a heavenly kingdom. Given all this, rational people cannot help thinking that such a vast means towards such an end did not come into being for the sake of a human race on one Earth. What would that be for a divine being, an infinite being, for whom thousands or tens of thousands of planets all fully inhabited would be so slight as to be practically nothing? There are spirits whose special passion is to learn at first hand, because this is the only kind of knowledge that gives them any pleasure. These spirits are therefore allowed to travel around and even to leave this solar system and visit others, to gather first-hand knowledge there. They have told me that there are inhabited planets not only in our solar system, but also outside it in the starry sky, a vast number of them. These spirits are from the planet Mercury. By a preliminary calculation, if there were 1,000,000 planets in the universe with 300 million people on each one, and 200 generations over 6,000 years, and if each person or spirit were allotted 3 cubic ells, and if all these people or spirits were gathered into one place, they would not even fill the volume of our Earth, hardly more than a satellite of one of the planets. This would be such a small space in the universe as to be barely visible, since we can scarcely see those satellites with the naked eye. What would this be for the Creator of the universe, for whom it would not be enough if the whole universe were filled? For the Creator is infinite. I have talked about this with angels, who have told me that they have much the same idea about how small the number of the human race is in comparison to the infinity of the Creator. However, they do not think in terms of space but of states, and to their minds, no matter how many tens of thousands of planets you could conceive of, it would still be simply nothing to the Lord. Information on the planets in the universe, their inhabitants, and the spirits and angels who come from them may be found in the booklet mentioned earlier. What you will find there has been revealed and shown to me to let people know that the Lord's heaven is vast, and that it is all from the human race, and also that our Lord is recognized everywhere as the God of heaven and earth. We may also gather how vast the Lord's heaven is from the fact that heaven in a single complex resembles a single human being and also corresponds to everything within us. This relationship can never be completely filled in, because there is a correspondence not only with the particular members and organs and viscera of the body, but also, in most minute detail, with all the tiny organelles and viscera within them, even with the individual vessels and fibers, and not only with these, but with the organic substances that receive the inflow of heaven from within, the inflow that gives us the inner processes that support the workings of our spirits. In fact, everything that happens within us happens in the forms of our substance. Anything that does not happen in substances as agents is nothing. There is a correspondence of all these substances with heaven, as you may gather from the chapter on the correspondence of everything in heaven with everything in the human being. This correspondence can never be completely filled in, because the more assemblies of angels there are that answer to each member, the more complete heaven is. In the heavens, all forms of perfection increase as numbers increase. This is because there is one goal for everything there, and a unanimous focus of everyone on that goal. That goal is the common good. And when this rules, there is benefit to individuals from the common good, and from the good of individuals to the good of the whole. This happens because the Lord turns everyone in heaven toward himself, and in this way makes them one with himself. Anyone with a little rational enlightenment can figure out that the unanimous harmony of many people, especially from such a source and with such intimacy, brings forth perfection. I have been allowed to see the extent of the inhabited heaven, and also the extent of the uninhabited heaven, and I have seen that the uninhabited heaven is so vast that it could never be filled to all eternity, even if there were thousands of planets, with as many people on each one as there are on ours. On this subject, see Other Planets in the Universe 168, because they take a few passages from the word literally. Some people think that heaven is not vast but small. For example, there are places where it says that only the poor will be accepted into heaven, or only the elect, or only people in the church and not people from outside, or only people for whom the Lord makes intercession, or that heaven will be closed when it is full, and that the time for this is foreordained. These people do not realize that heaven will never be closed, that there is no foreordained time, no fixed number, and that the elect are people who live lives of goodness and truth, that the poor are people who have not found out what is good and true, but who long to. They are also called the hungry because of this longing. People who think that heaven is small because they have misunderstood the word can only be thinking that heaven is in a single place where everyone is gathered together. Yet in fact, heaven consists of countless communities. Further, they can only be thinking that heaven is granted to individuals out of direct mercy, and therefore consists simply of admission and acceptance out of goodwill. They do not realize that the Lord, out of his mercy, leads everyone who accepts him, and that the people who accept him are the people who live according to the laws of the divine design, which are precepts of love and faith. They do not realize that being led by the Lord from infancy to the end of earthly life and then on to eternity is what mercy really means. If only they knew that everyone is born for heaven, that people are accepted into heaven who accept heaven into themselves in this world, and that people who do not accept it are shut out.